The most dangerous thing a man can be, I've learned, is invisible. Not ignored, not dismissed. Invisible. Because ignored means someone looked and decided you weren't worth their time. Invisible means they never looked at all. And the people who never look, those are the ones who eventually walk straight into the thing they never saw coming. My name is Walter Kemp. I'm 67 years old. I live alone now in the same house on Birchwood Crescent in Guelph, Ontario, that my wife Donna and I bought in 1989, the year the Jays were building something real, and we were doing the same. 3 bedrooms, a backyard that gets good light until about 4 in the afternoon, and a 2004 Dodge Caravan that my daughter Claire has been trying to replace since roughly 2021. It's gray. Or it was gray. Now it's more the color of a February sky over Lake Huron, which is to say, gray in the way that only years of Canadian winters can make something gray. I've put 340,000 kilometers on it. I know every sound it makes and what each one means. I wear clean clothes. Flannel shirts mostly, a few button-downs for when the situation calls for it. Good boots. A Tilly hat in summer that Claire says makes me look like a retired geography teacher. That's fine. I taught geography, so the hat checks out. I retired from teaching 11 years ago, which is what I tell people when they ask. What I don't tell them is that 23 years ago, while I was still marking papers and attending parent-teacher nights, I started buying commercial real estate in southern Ontario quietly. Methodically, a strip mall in Cambridge, a small industrial property outside Hamilton, a self-storage facility that I still can't entirely explain why I bought, and which has been my single most profitable investment every year since 2004. Today those holdings are organized under a numbered company called 0847392 Ontario Inc., which I renamed informally among the small group of people who know about it as Birchwood Holdings. I have a property management company run by a very capable woman named Sandra Okafor, who has worked with me for 14 years and who I trust completely. I have a commercial lawyer named David Yip in Kitchener, who has never once missed a detail. Between the properties, the rental income, and 2 strategic sales at the right time, Birchwood Holdings is worth somewhere north of $40 million. I drive a Caravan with a cracked dashboard and a heat setting that only works on 3. I wouldn't change any of it. Now, let me tell you about my daughter. Claire Kemp is 31 years old, and she is, without any hesitation, the best decision I was ever involved in. She has her mother's eyes, and her mother's laugh, and her grandfather's stubbornness, which in the Kemp family has always been considered a virtue. She was a straight-A student who chose social work over business because she said, at 17, that she wasn't interested in accumulating things. She was interested in people. I remember sitting across from her at this same kitchen table, thinking, yes, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. What I did not anticipate was her husband. 2 years ago, Claire brought home Ethan Garrow. I want to be fair. I will try to be measured. Ethan Garrow is 35 years old, good-looking in the way that men who have been told they're good-looking their entire lives tend to carry it, which is to say, slightly in front of themselves. He works in commercial real estate development. Or he did. I'll come back to that. He is from Oakville. He mentions this regularly and without apparent awareness of how often he mentions it. He drives a BMW 5 Series, dark gray, always clean, the kind of car that communicates a specific thing to people in certain rooms. He has a firm handshake and good teeth, and within 20 minutes of meeting me, he had mentioned his portfolio, the downtown condo he'd flipped before the market softened, and a deal he was working on in the Kitchener-Waterloo corridor. He said corridor. I nodded. I said, that's a good market. He agreed enthusiastically, which told me he hadn't noticed that I said it first. He married Claire 14 months ago in a ceremony at a vineyard outside Niagara-on-the-Lake that cost more than I spent on my first property, though I kept that observation to myself. Here is what Ethan Garrow did not know on his wedding day, and does not know to this day. Among the holdings of Birchwood Holdings is a company called Greenvale Property Group. Greenvale is a mid-sized commercial development firm based in Burlington. 41 employees. Several active projects in the Hamilton-Burlington-Waterloo Triangle. Good reputation, solid books, a team that I am genuinely proud of. I acquired it 9 years ago when its founder retired and wanted a quiet exit. I kept the name. I kept the staff. I kept my name nowhere visible in the corporate structure. 8 months ago, Ethan Garrow was hired as Senior Development Manager at Greenvale Property Group. I knew before he did that he'd applied. I reviewed his file. I sat in on a panel call through a dial-in arrangement that our HR firm uses for senior candidate screens. I listened to him answer questions about market positioning in Ontario's mid-market commercial sector. He was good. He was genuinely good. Not exceptional, but competent, confident, and he understood the corridor, which apparently actually means something. I approved the hire. Then I went out to the backyard and pulled some of the beets that had been in the ground too long. His first day at Greenvale, he sent Claire a photo of his office view. She sent it to me with a string of hearts. I replied, "Wonderful." Tell him I said congratulations, which I meant, because I want to be honest about something. I gave Ethan Garrow a real chance. I am not someone who decides about people quickly. I have hired enough human beings, managed enough personalities, sat across enough boardroom tables to know that first impressions are not verdicts. People grow. People show you things you didn't expect. I've been surprised before in both directions. Ethan surprised me, eventually. Just not in the direction I was hoping for. It started small, the way these things always do. There was the family dinner at Claire's apartment in Waterloo, 4 months after the wedding, where Ethan held forth for 20 minutes about the Ontario housing market, while I sat quietly and asked polite questions, and Claire quietly watched me in the way she has watched me since she was 9 years old, like she's reading something just below the surface. He wasn't wrong about anything he said, particularly. He just said all of it as though he'd discovered it personally. At one point, he explained cap rates to me. I listened attentively and thanked him for the explanation. Then there was the summer barbecue at their place, where one of Ethan's friends from Oakville asked me what I did. And before I could answer, Ethan said pleasantly, easily, with the confidence of a man who considers this a compliment, "Oh, Walter taught school, retired now, very relaxed life." His friend nodded and turned back to Ethan. I took a sip of my iced tea and looked out at the backyard. But the specific moment, that happened on a Thursday afternoon in November. I had stopped by Greenvale's Burlington office to meet quietly with the property manager about a maintenance issue on one of our Hamilton assets. I came in the side entrance, the way I usually do, through the secondary lobby where the administrative staff work. An old man in a flannel shirt and a caravan that pulls left. Nobody looks twice. I was passing the corridor near the open plan development floor when I heard Ethan's voice carrying from around the partition wall. He was talking to someone, another manager by the sound of it, easy and relaxed, the way people talk when they believe they're in a private conversation. I stopped. "Claire's dad," Ethan was saying, and there was a warmth in his voice that had a specific quality to it. The warmth of someone being generous about a person they have quietly decided is not quite their equal. "He's a sweet guy. Retired teacher. Drives this absolute beast of a minivan, you should see it. Claire keeps trying to get him to upgrade, but he won't." A pause, and then quieter, but not quiet enough. "I think he's one of those guys who just, never quite got traction. The teaching thing, the same house for 30 years. I feel like life kind of passed him by a little. Claire's devoted to him, which is beautiful, but you know how it is. Some people just coast. Some people just coast." I stood in that corridor for 3 seconds. Then I straightened my jacket and walked back the way I came. I am not an angry man. My father was not an angry man either. He was a patient one, an electrician from Guelph who worked 40 years and never once raised his voice in a situation where patience would serve better. He used to say, "Walt, you can't fix what you haven't fully understood yet. Take the time." I took the time. I took 4 months. If you're watching us for the first time, just a quick ask. Hit subscribe before you go. It's free and it helps more than you'd think. Okay, back to it. The call came from Claire on a Wednesday evening in early March. She was warm, happy, a little bit excited in the way she gets when she's about to present something she's been thinking about for a while. Ethan's parents, Robert and Lorraine, wanted to do a family dinner, not a restaurant. Their home in Oakville, a proper sit-down, meet properly, all of us. They felt like they didn't really know me yet, Claire said. They wanted to fix that. "Dad, you'll love them," she said. "They're very genuine people." "I'm sure they are, sweetheart," I said. I already knew a few things about Robert and Lorraine Garrow that complicated that sentence somewhat. Robert had sold a Waterloo tech company for a reasonably well-publicized amount in 2018 and had been trading on that single event ever since. Lorraine was the kind of woman who mentions charitable board positions the way other people mention the weather, frequently and without being asked. But I said none of that. I told Claire I was looking forward to it. I told her I'd be there. Then Ethan called. He called me directly, which was unusual enough to register. He was friendly, breezy, doing the verbal equivalent of loosening his collar before saying something he'd rehearsed in the car on the way home. "Hey, Walter, just wanted to give you a heads up about Saturday," he said. "Mom and Dad, they're pretty traditional, formal table, the whole thing. It's kind of their way of, marking occasions. So I just wanted to mention, in case it's helpful, it might be worth dressing up a bit. Nothing crazy, just maybe something a step up from, the usual." There was a pause. "Ethan," I said pleasantly, "I appreciate you thinking of me." "Of course," he said, relieved, moving on quickly. "And hey, if you want, I can pick you up so you don't have to deal with the highway." "I'll drive myself," I said. "I'll see you Saturday." I hung up. I stood at my hallway mirror for a long moment, looking at myself. Then I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, moved past the 4 suits hanging at the back in their dry cleaning bags. The ones I wear when Birchwood closes something significant, the charcoal one I wore when we signed the Greenvale acquisition, the navy one from David Yip's retirement dinner last spring. I moved past all of them. I laid out a clean pair of dark corduroys, a pressed flannel shirt, dark green. My good boots, the ones with the reinforced toe that my neighbor Ray Bellingham says make me look like I'm about to survey something. I set them out carefully, the way you set out exactly the right thing. Then I went to the driveway. The Caravan sat there in the thin March light, the cracked dashboard visible through the windshield, the passenger side mirror held at a slight angle by a bracket I replaced myself 3 winters ago. I stood beside it for a moment. Big dinner Saturday, I thought. Dress code's been specified. I think we're both underdressed. Because here is what Ethan Garrow did not understand. Here is what Robert and Lorraine Garrow, in their house in Oakville, were not going to understand until it was far too late. I wasn't showing up in clean corduroys because I had nothing better. I was showing up in clean corduroys because I wanted to see exactly who they were when they thought nothing was at stake. And I had the kind of quiet, unhurried certainty that only comes after 67 years of being the man nobody looked at twice, that they were about to show me something I needed to see. Saturday came the way Saturdays do when you're not dreading them. I was up at 6. Coffee, black, sitting at the kitchen window watching the early light find the birch tree in the backyard that Donna planted in 1996 and that has now grown large enough to shade the whole north side of the lawn. I sat with it for a while. I am good at sitting with things. I dressed slowly. Corduroys, flannel shirt, boots. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror and thought, yes, that's exactly right. The Caravan grumbled at first start the way it always does in March. A low complaint about the cold that I have come to find reliable, even comforting. I drove the 401 west to Oakville with the heated seat set to low, which is the only setting that still works properly, and pulled off at the exit that leads through the kind of neighborhood where the street trees are mature and the driveways are interlock stone. The Garrow house at the end of a cul-de-sac was exactly what I expected. Large, newer construction designed to suggest old money while having been built in 2007. A 3-car garage, a front entrance that required walking up 5 very intentional stone steps, subtle lighting positioned to show the house at its best in the evening, all of it communicating, "We have arrived, and we want you to know it when you pull up." I parked on the street. A young man was managing the circular driveway area with the focused manner of someone who had been asked to look helpful without looking like hired help. He looked at the Caravan, then at me, then at the Caravan. "Good evening, sir," he said, recovering well. "Can I take that for you?" "Thank you, son," I said. "She'll pull right if you let her. Give her a moment to settle." He nodded with the expression of a man who had just added several variables to his evening. I walked up the 5 stone steps. Robert Garrow opened the door before I reached it. He was a big man, mid-70s, white-haired, thick across the shoulders, in the way that men built for physical confidence sometimes retain even in retirement. He was dressed in that specific way of successful men hosting at home. Expensive casual, a merino sweater, pressed trousers, the kind of loafers that cost $400 and are designed to look like they didn't. His smile arrived before his eyes did. "Walter," he said my name like a statement. Come in, come in. Great to finally do this properly." His handshake was firm and 2 seconds long. Practiced. I noted it. The house inside was exactly the driveway's promise continued. High ceilings. Art chosen to signal taste rather than feeling. A staircase with an iron railing that curved up with the particular confidence of staircases that know they are being noticed. A kitchen visible at the back, restaurant-grade appliances, the kind of kitchen designed to be seen more than used. Lorraine Garrow appeared from the living room, assembled, precise, pleasant in the way of women who have spent decades in rooms where how you present matters as much as what you say. Her jewelry was tasteful in the expensive way that very expensive jewelry presents itself as tasteful. She took my hands in both of hers. "Walter," she said warmly, "we've heard so much about you. You are just exactly as Claire described, so down to earth. Down to earth, there it was. First word out of her mouth, down to earth. Not accomplished, not interesting, not perceptive, down to earth. The adjective people reach for when they mean to compliment someone, but what they're actually doing is establishing a floor. "Thank you, Lorraine," I said warmly. "Your home is beautiful." She lit up. People who have built their identity around what they own never tire of hearing about what they own. It is one of the most reliable things I know about a certain kind of person. Claire came from across the room and hugged me the way she has hugged me since she was 4 years old, both arms, full commitment. I held it for a half-second longer than usual. "You look great, Dad," she said quietly. "So do you, sweetheart," I said. Ethan materialized behind her. He looked at my corduroys, at my flannel shirt with an expression that moved through his face fast but not invisibly. A flash of something, the specific pain of a man who had specifically asked for a different outcome, and then the recovery smile, the warm, public, hosting smile. "Walter, glad you made it," he said, one hand on my shoulder. "Robert just opened something from his cellar. Come on in." Something from his cellar. I filed this away. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the kind of formality that takes most of a day to arrange and exists primarily to establish who belongs at it and who has been graciously included. Heavy linen, real silverware, crystal glasses that reflected the candles in a way that I suspect was intentional. I sat down, unfolded my napkin, and became invisible. Not because anyone made me invisible, because I chose it. Because I have spent 67 years learning that the most valuable thing you can do, in a room full of people who think they've already assessed you, is let them believe they're right. So I sat. I asked polite questions. I complimented the wine. I laughed at Robert's stories, which were told with the cadence of a man who has told them many times and still considers each one fresh. I said very little about myself, and I watched. Robert talked about the tech exit. Not once. It came up 3 times, in different forms, always with the gentle circling motion of a man who considers it the organizing principle of his identity. He talked about a ski trip to Whistler, about his golf membership, about Ethan's instincts in the current Ontario market. "The boy sees things before the market does," Robert said, leaning back with the pride of a man who believes he built what he's looking at. "Greenvale is exactly the right move. Getting in at that level, with real projects, real assets. That's where careers get made." He looked at me as he said this last part, not unkindly, but deliberately, the look that draws a comparison without requiring the words. "That's wonderful," I said. "You must be very proud." Lorraine turned to Claire with a smile of a very particular shape. "And Claire, you must feel so settled. Having a partner who's so driven and strategic, it's such a relief, isn't it? When things come together the way they're supposed to. The way they're supposed to." The table went slightly quiet for half a second. Claire smiled graciously. I saw her eyes. I know those eyes. I picked up my water glass and said nothing, because the thing I had been waiting for hadn't arrived yet. And I knew it was coming. I have waited for much longer than a dinner party before. Patience, in my experience, is not a virtue. It's a precision instrument. It arrived with dessert. I had been at that table for just over 2 hours. 2 hours of nods, of appropriate laughter, of questions asked and answered and redirected, of a very convincing performance of a retired teacher from Guelph who was grateful to be included and not entirely sure what a cap rate was. I wore that role the way I've worn it my entire adult life, without seam, without effort. Then Robert reached under the table, and I felt it. The specific internal shift that I've learned to recognize over decades. The moment when a situation moves from forward to story. He set a document on the table. A proper document, tabbed, bound at the top with a metal clasp. He placed it deliberately, smoothed it once with his palm, and slid it across the tablecloth toward me. "Walter," he said. His voice had dropped into the register of a man who has rehearsed a specific tone for a specific moment. Warm, serious, collegial, in the way of people asking you to do something they believe is obviously reasonable. "We'd like to talk about something, as a family." I looked at the document. I did not touch it. Lorraine's hands were folded in front of her. Ethan had straightened slightly in his chair, with the posture of a man practicing being casual about something he is not remotely casual about. Claire looked at me quickly, then at the document, then at Robert. Her hands in her lap were not still. Ethan has a vision, Robert said. Something he's been building toward. His own development company, independent, real projects, built on what he's learned. We believe in it completely. We've looked at the numbers and the fundamentals are there. He nodded toward the document. What we're proposing is a bridge arrangement. A private loan, structured against Claire's future inheritance from your estate, used to secure initial operating capital for the venture. It's been drawn up properly, legal counts reviewed, everything above board. We're not asking for anything immediate, just a letter of intent from you confirming that Claire would be positioned to inherit, and the approximate scale so the financing can be structured. He leaned forward slightly. We just need your agreement, Walter, as Claire's father. It's really just a formality. Just a formality. I looked at Robert. I looked at Lorraine, whose smile had the fixed quality of something applied before the conversation started and not yet adjusted. I looked at Ethan, confident, certain, already doing the arithmetic on something he'd decided was already in motion. And I thought very quietly, you have no idea who you just asked. I picked up the document, I opened it. I read every page, every clause, every defined term, every schedule. I read it slowly and completely, while the candles made small adjustments to the air, and the clock in the hallway ticked, and nobody at that table said a single word. I know how to read a legal document. I have been reading them for 23 years. I closed it, set it gently back on the table, picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, looked at Robert Garrow with the warmest expression I own. I appreciate the thought that went into this, I said. I'll need some time to review it carefully. Robert exhaled in the specific way of a man who has been holding tension for an hour and has just released it. Ethan's shoulders moved a half-inch. Lorraine reached for her wine with the relieved grace of a woman who believes the hard work is finished. They thought that was a yes. I finished my water. I made pleasant conversation for another 20 minutes. I complimented the creme brulee, which was genuinely excellent. I thanked Lorraine for a beautiful evening. I shook Robert's hand at the door, firm this time, my eyes holding his for exactly 1 second longer than the occasion required. He didn't know what that second was. I walked down the 5 stone steps. The young man brought the caravan around with the expression of a man who had spent the evening making a private assessment and had reached a different conclusion than the one he started with. I tipped him well, more than he expected. I watched his face change. I drove home on the 401 with the heat on 3, the cracked dashboard faintly lit by the instruments, and the kind of quiet in the car that isn't empty. That has weight to it. I said nothing for 16 days. I tended the garden on Sunday. I had coffee with my neighbor Ray on Tuesday morning. I drove to the library, which I do every second Thursday, because I still have a library card and I see no reason to stop using it. On day 5, Ethan sent me a text. Hey Walter, hope you had a chance to look things over. Let me know if you have any questions, happy to walk you through it. I waited 4 hours. I typed, still working through it, Ethan. Want to make sure I understand it properly. He sent back a thumbs up and an emoji of a house. I set my phone on the counter and made a phone call. Not to Ethan, not to Robert. To David Yip in Kitchener. I need 2 things, I said. First, I want a full governance review on Greenvale. Everything on Ethan Garrow's activity over the last 8 months. Company time, company systems, company contacts. All of it. Second, I want Claire's inheritance structured and transferred. Everything that was going to come to her eventually, I want it in a personal account in her name only, irrevocably, this week. David Yip, who has known me for 14 years and has never wasted a word, said, I'll have the review started today and the transfer documents ready by Thursday. Thank you, I said. I hung up and went back to the garden. Here is what I knew that Ethan Garrow, in his Oakville planning sessions with his father, did not know. When I had personally structured Ethan's employment contract at Greenvale, I had included a clause. A standard clause, one I had used in various forms for 15 years, covering confidentiality, conflict of interest, and the use of company resources and relationships for competing purposes. It was a careful clause, drafted by David Yip, reviewed by a second counsel, built with the specific patience of a man who has learned that what you write in the quiet years determines what you have available in the loud ones. Ethan had signed it. I know because I had reviewed the executed copy before his start date. The governance review took 12 days. When the final report came back, I sat with it at the kitchen table for a long time. Not because I was surprised. I wasn't surprised. I sat with it because I believe that before you do something that changes the shape of people's lives, you should sit with it long enough to be completely certain. What the review found was not dramatic, not criminal, but unambiguous. For 7 of his 8 months at Greenvale, Ethan had been using company time and company relationships to develop a business plan for an independent venture. Contacts sourced through Greenvale's internal client database. Site assessments conducted on company time. Preliminary meetings with potential investors, scheduled through his company calendar, using his company email. All of it direct and clear and documented. All of it in direct breach of the clause he had signed. He had been building something in a house he thought belonged to someone else. But it had always belonged to me. On a Tuesday morning in early April, I put on the charcoal suit from the back of my closet. I pressed it the night before. I drove the Caravan to Burlington, to Greenvale's office, and I parked in the space near the side entrance that has a small placard that reads Birchwood Holdings. Reserved. The space Ethan had parked beside 3 times a week for 8 months, without once asking whose name was on the sign. I walked into the boardroom. I sat at the head of the table. To my right, 2 members of Greenvale's senior leadership team. Across the table, David Yip and a second lawyer, a folder in front of me. On the wall across from me, a clock 11:47. At 11:50, Ethan walked in. He was carrying the easy confidence he always carries, fitted to him, natural, the way you carry something when you've never had a reason to put it down. He looked at the room, at the lawyers, at the leadership team, at the documents on the table, and then his eyes found me, sitting at the head of the table, in a suit he had never once seen me wear. I watched him understand, watched it move through him the way a cold front moves across the lake, floor by floor, everything arriving at once. The posting, the interview, the contract clause, the dinner, the document sliding across the tablecloth, his father's careful voice saying it was just a formality. 16 days of silence. The parking sign he had driven past 3 times a week. I let it land. All of it. The silence was about 10 seconds. I counted. Then I said quietly, "Sit down, Ethan." He sat. "I want to be straightforward with you," I said. "Not because I'm angry. I want to be clear about that. I'm not angry. Anger is what you feel when something surprises you. Nothing about the last 8 months has surprised me." I opened the folder. Greenvale Property Group is owned by Birchwood Holdings. Birchwood Holdings is mine. Has been for 9 years. The company you've been working at, the salary you've been drawing, the projects you've had your name on, all of it exists within something I built and continue to own. I recruited you because I looked at what you could do and I believed there was something real there. I gave you a full platform. Good projects, a capable team, real responsibility. I paused. For 7 of your 8 months there, you used that platform to build something designed to run parallel to the foundation that was paying for it. The governance review is thorough. The breach of your contract is documented on 41 pages. Our legal team has reviewed the full scope. I closed the folder. I'm not interested in pursuing this publicly. That's not what this is. What I'm interested in is clarity. So here is how this goes. You resign today. You do it professionally. You give a reasonable notice period. You support the transition. Your reputation stays intact. This conversation stays in this room. Or we proceed through the proper channels, and everything in this folder becomes a matter of record. He looked at the lawyers, neutral. He looked at the leadership team, neutral. He looked back at me. And I want to be honest about what I saw next. Because it wasn't what I expected, and it matters that I say this accurately. I expected defiance or calculation, the look of a man trying to find the angle. What I saw instead was something quieter. Something that took a moment to identify. Shame, not performed, not strategic. Real shame, the deep kind, the kind that doesn't come from getting caught. It comes from finally seeing yourself in a mirror you've been avoiding. "I'll resign," he said, quietly. Like the words had weight. "All right," I said. I stood, I buttoned my jacket. At the door I stopped. "One more thing," I said. "The proposal your father put on the table at dinner, the letter of intent, the inheritance as security." I thought about it for 16 days. I let that sit for a moment. Claire's inheritance was transferred into a personal account in her name, irrevocably, 3 days ago, her signature only. Nothing that was going to come to her eventually is where anyone thought it was. Tell your father, the bridge arrangement doesn't have anywhere to bridge to. And tell your mother the creme brulee was exceptional. I drove home on the 401 with the heat on 3 and the cracked dashboard, and the March light coming through a windshield that needed cleaning, and I can tell you honestly, completely at peace. Not triumphant. Not satisfied in the way people mean when they talk about revenge. Just clear. The way the air is clear after a full day of rain. I parked in the driveway. I sat in the caravan for a moment, engine running. 31 years of being the man the room didn't bother to look at, and knowing exactly, precisely, who I was the entire time. I patted the dashboard once. The way you acknowledge something that has been with you long enough to deserve it. Then I went inside and I called my daughter. She came over that evening and found me at the kitchen table, 2 cups of tea already made, the birch tree visible through the back window in the last of the day's light. She sat down across from me and looked at my face the way she has looked at my face since she was small, reading it. She has always been able to read it. I told her everything, from the beginning. The properties, Birchwood, Greenvale, the reason Ethan's job posting had landed where it did, the contract clause, the governance review, the boardroom, the transfer, all of it, laid out quietly, in order, the way you tell someone the truth when you've been holding it carefully for a long time. When I finished, Claire was quiet for a while. She held her mug with both hands and looked at the table, and I let her have the silence because she needed it. Then she looked up at me with her mother's eyes and asked the question that I knew was coming and that I had been carrying the answer to for a very long time. "Dad," she said, "why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at my tea. I looked out at the birch tree. I looked back at my daughter, at Donna's eyes in her face, at the stubbornness that I have always considered a virtue, at the 17-year-old who told me she wasn't interested in accumulating things. "Because I needed you to be you," I said. Not the daughter of Birchwood Holdings, not the heir to anything. Just you, choosing your own life, on your own terms. I never wanted you to look at me and see a portfolio. I wanted you to see your father," she cried. I held her hand across the table and I let her. And I thought about Robert Garrow in Oakville, sitting very still in a house that had always been intended to communicate something, and finding that the communication had gone the wrong direction entirely. I thought about Lorraine setting down her wine. I thought about Ethan, driving home on the QEW, finding the words to explain to his parents that the retired teacher in the clean corduroys had turned out to be the one person in that dining room they should never, not for one single moment, have looked past. I thought about all of it. Then I let it go, because the only thing in that kitchen that mattered was sitting right across from me, hands around a warm mug, red-eyed and smiling through it. My daughter, the finest decision I was ever involved in. Some people coast through life, apparently, and some people just look that way. The ones who can't tell the difference always find out eventually.